Hey, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night. Have we got a treat for you tonight? I have got riding shotgun Vicki Joy, and then again, riding shotgun in real life, my good friend Chris Shoemaker. Hey, we have been friends a super long time.
Yeah.
And Vic, this is one of my old high school gangsters. And if you would have went to our high school, you would have been in the gang. Okay.
And it would have been awesome.
And Katie would have been in the gang too.
That's right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Chris, I don't know if you remember this, but we kind of had like a presence in high school where we would hunt down people that were involved in the occult and basically say, hey, this is our turf. There's not room for the both of us. And we meant well, but we, I know I wanted to intimidate these guys.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe not the best way to go about it, maybe not very loving, but hey, we didn't know that much yet, right?
In the school or out of the school?
Both. Anyway.
Okay.
We would track them down. Yeah. We were investigating occult crime. There was a place, Chris. Do you remember the legend of Satan Town? It was people would talk about it, and it was around this area. And I had heard that people would go out to this place in Lexington on the weekends late at night, and they saw satanic activity there.
This isn't the same place as Mary Jane's grave.
No, this is different. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, Mary Jane's grave is another real place where
I remember we went there and we got chased off, shotguns and all this crazy.
Yeah. So during the summer, we would have some adventures, right?
Wow. So were there actually kids in school practicing the occult, or are these just a couple lone kids wearing Slayer t-shirts?
You know what? There were people here and there involved in some stuff, but it was mostly kids wearing, into heavy metal. Okay.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah. But at the time we took that very seriously because of, the content of the music, and we wanted to witness. So, I guess I left the tape upstairs, but, Chris has been over here for a little bit, and I showed him this tape that we used to give out in school, where we would save up our money and buy a bunch of bulk tapes and give out Christian music in school. And I had a copy of it. I wish I would have brought it downstairs. Is it in this box? No. So anyway, and we used to give out Bibles, and he saw this in the library, and this is the Bible that we used to give out. Yeah. We would get them free from this place called the King's Place. We didn't need them, but we knew we would run into somebody that did.
Yeah.
So we gave out a lot of these Bibles.
Wow.
Anyway, as I was sharing, I think I shared this before before we went live, and I'm just checking the chat here. I forget what I was going to say now. Sorry, I was checking the chat. But anyway, we met in drama class actually in high school, and I don't know if you remember that. We had to do a mime, and I remember Chris's mime was David and Goliath. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we had to do these different things, and I can't remember what one of them was. The crucifixion, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The David and Goliath one, I know he got an A on that one. I can't remember what mine were. They're nowhere near as good as Chris's drama. It was real good. So.
Well, I thought you did pretty good in the Taming of the Shrew.
The Taming of the Shrew, yeah.
You doing that. You were the guy with the whip or whatever.
Yeah. Did you let me borrow a whip? I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah, I had a little bullwhip.
And I had to learn how to
snap it.
Oh no. Who gave Tom Dunn a whip? This is a bad idea.
So I snapped myself a few times. It took a while.
If I'm not mistaken, I think we were in drama class, and what drew my attention is you had like a Christian rock cassette on your table or something. That kind of is like, hey, what's this kind of thing? And I think that's how we first.
Well, that's how we got connected. And I think both of our reputations went before us, because I knew Chris Shoemaker.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the other Christian guy in school. Like, there's two radical Christian guys in school. I'm one of them. He's the other one. And we finally met. And then the rest is history.
Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It was the Jerusalem dancing on the head of the serpent.
Okay.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, Vic, here we are. And we're like, how do we reach? We were on fire for Jesus, right? And we want to reach our peers. There were all of the crazy things that were going on: suicide, teen pregnancy, abortion, drug use, the occult, the Satanism. So back when we were in high school is when Geraldo broke his, famous show, Devil Worship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it had everybody, on edge, satanic panic, that kind of thing. We're like going to the woods and looking for all that stuff. And once in a while we found it. People reading the Satanic Bible and stuff like that. So we traveled around wearing leather jackets and jean jackets that were all, decked out with whatever kind of artwork on them and stuff.
Oh man, I should have brought that army jacket that I wore.
Yeah.
It was my dad's army jacket, olive green, drab, and on the back of it I used red and black Sharpies and made like this huge picture of the crucifixion. And
Whoa.
it was like the Mel Gibson version. Like it was just as gory and as bloody as you can imagine. But my Jesus was buff because I was so sick and tired of Jesus, like this little, like skinny guru, mamby-pamby Jesus on the cross. And people would be like, do you really think he was that way? I'm like, yeah, he was a carpenter. He was a construction worker. He walked everywhere he went. So yeah, I kind of think he had muscle. Maybe I put a little bit of too much muscle on him, but nonetheless, it was definitely a conversation starter for a lot of people.
So this is kind of interesting here, and I don't know if anybody will be able to see this, but this is a flyer that was put up in our school. And when we saw this, we took it. It was a flyer for a metal concert, and I'll just read to you the bands that were playing. And it has posers crossed out, right? And it says the bands were Strychnine, Aggressor, and The Uninvited. Okay. And then it's got a picture of a skeleton shooting a guy against the wall. So it says, posers die a painful death. They put this up on our high school wall. And I don't know if anybody's going to be able to see this. Okay. Can you see that artwork at the bottom?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow.
So when we saw this, we decided that we were going to do ministry in a similar way through artwork like this. And I found this box tonight. So we began to draw up these and I'm looking for these. Some of these are even original. This is an original.
Oh my goodness. That's like oh wow. I just have the Xerox copies.
Right. So this is original artwork that Chris drew, and it was called the
way.
Monthly Mosh. Mosh standing for March on Satan's Head.
Oh, okay? I love that. Come on.
And people are not going to be able to appreciate this artwork, but we make copies of this. My church allowed me to make copies of this. Same church I'm going to now, by the way.
Oh wow.
And we would pass these out to students. And I'll just read to you what it says, and then I'll show it to you. And it's got a guy who's got a gun to his head, and a demon is speaking into his ear, saying, "Face it, kid, your life's a mess, pull the trigger." We're trying to say there's spiritual warfare going on. And it says, suicide is a lie. And it's got Bible verses on it. And it says, live your life for a change. And the Bible is on the shelf. It's hard to see. 1 Peter 5:7. And it's going to be hard to see that, but we passed this out in high school, and we made a bunch of these. We made one every month, and we put them in
like hundreds of copies at a time.
Oh yeah, and we had people that would distribute them in the restrooms.
Now, before Tom goes any further, just remember this picture. This reminds me of a Tom Dunn original song.
Oh no.
Okay, Tom Dunn original song.
Is it a parody?
No. It was the one. You're not better off dead. It's all in your head. Put away the knife, start living your life. Unload the gun, accept the sun. You're not better off dead.
Oh, wow. Tom, we should collaborate on some poetry now that I know about your
better
gifting.
than I do. Yeah, we not only did we make these cartoons, but yeah, I managed a band or two in high school. I wrote the lyrics to the songs. So I thought you were going to sing the song about my hair.
Well, since you brought it up.
Well, no.
Wait, hold on. I mean, like I said, this is your one shot. So,
okay.
Folks, if you're listening to this is your friend, Tom Dunn, okay? And you see what I went through, and you see what made me what I am today. I think, maybe they think they were having fun, but I think they were making fun of me. I really do. So go ahead.
Well, okay. So this was back in the day when Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet album was like all the rage. Yep. And so Tom always had kind of this moppy, raggy, stringy hair kind of thing going on.
Still do, actually.
I was going to say had. What are you talking about?
And so we made up a song. We said, oh, take a look at Tom's hair. Whoa, what's living in his hair? Take the comb and brush it. I swear he used some bad shampoo. Bad shampoo is what Tom used. Oh,
it's a medley.
Hey, yeah. Wow. So, yeah, this is what happened. And there was, believe it or not, there was ministry that took place too. But for whatever reason, guys getting together, they like to hurt each other's feelings, right? No, we had a lot of fun, and we had a good group of guys. Chris and I got together, and as much fun as we had, we were dead serious.
Oh yeah,
about doing a ministry, and we started a ministry called The Violent Peace, and it was really kind of inspired by that picture that we saw because it was so violent. But we said that the cross is a violent peace because Jesus died a violent death to bring us peace, and that was our message. So we began in a very organized way that Christian high school metalheads could begin witnessing to people and discipling people. And when we heard about somebody in need, we would try to find a way. We were like, okay, who can help this guy? We would hear about people that were suicidal, and we're like, okay, we got to get to this guy. We got to pray for this guy. We got to get this guy a Bible. We got to get this guy, something, somebody to spend time with him. So that's the story. I mean, we got a lot of stories of people that we helped, stayed up all night praying with them, things like that. And people that are probably still alive today because of God used us, in the ministry. So I've told this story before, but we made some other flyers, and I actually put my phone number on it for people to call. And I got in trouble with my stepdad because I passed my phone number out all over town, and people called, and I wasn't always there to answer the phone. Oh. So anyway,
way before cell phones.
Yeah, way before cell phones, and so yeah, fun times. But no, we saw a lot of fruit from doing this ministry. Chris, when I was going down, when I came to pick you up today, of course you're staying, in the same place that you lived in high school. I remember pulling into that driveway so many times, and with a purpose, like, okay, we got to have a prayer meeting. We got to get together. We got to talk about this, and so-and-so needs help. And then of course, being on the phone late at night, having prayer meetings, all glory to God. You know what I'm saying? I'm glad he got a hold of my heart young and just really, moved in my life in a way where I got real serious with God. And there were others too. I mean, Chris and I were here tonight, but we had other friends that were dead serious about the Lord, and they're still saved today. We're so thankful for that. So, and it's cool, when you run into people, you haven't seen in a long time, and they're still serving God. So yeah, very good. Anything like, anything that's not particularly making fun of me that you can remember, like,
or ones that where you are.
Yeah. Well, we used to have a Bible study. We used to start. We tried different things. We all pretty much took our Bibles with us to school.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, we carried them with
Wow.
us wherever we went.
They were the first book on top of our desk in the classroom,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even if we didn't have our textbook, that's what we carried. We carried our sword,
Yeah.
our Bible.
And there was persecution, not a lot, but I've had people slap my Bible off the desk, and I would just go over and pick it up and put it back on. So,
well, I remember, we're talking about that jacket that I had with Jesus on the cross. I remember one day this guy just for some reason all day long was just harassing me and hounding me and just making fun of me and laughing at me and blah 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 blah. So I just finally got tired of it, and I took the jacket off and I said, "You think you're so brave?" I said, "You're making fun of me." I said, "But do you have the balls to wear this?" And I shoved it, and he just jumped back like it was covered with cooties or something. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I thought. At least I have the guts to wear this, and you don't." And it shut him up. And that that reminds me of another story. If I can kind of monopolize the time a little bit.
Go ahead, man.
So there was this other guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he was one of my bullies. And for whatever reason, maybe because I was an easy target, 90-pound wuss, whatever it was, he decided to try to make my life a living hell each and every day. Well, I
remember this. Yeah.
One day, he caught me off school grounds. I was skateboarding somewhere. He saw me in a parking lot. Next thing I know, I turn around. He's like running after me, fist drawn, and he decks me. I mean, just flat out decks me. And I wasn't a fighter, right? So I just picked up my skateboard and I ran home. And I thought, man, what did I just do? Like, oh man, I know what's going to happen. Like, I ran away like I was a chicken. He's going to tease me tomorrow at school. Like, what am I going to do? And then the Lord just kind of downloaded what I was to do. So I knew exactly what was going to happen. As soon as my bus pulled up, him and his posse were right there waiting for me as I was stepping off the bus. Look at the chicken, the sissy ran away, blah, 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 following me and hounding me into the school. And so I thought, I'm going to give this guy what he wants. So I said, we'll just call him Bob. I said, okay, Bob, you want to throw? And his eyes lit up and he's like, yeah, I want to throw. I said, you want to throw? Threw my backpack over in the corner. You want to throw? Took my jacket off, threw it down. And by that time, we got a big circle of people because every time there's a fight, you get that circle, right? And so everybody's like waiting for a fight and getting all excited. And he's there, like Muhammad Ali bouncing up and down. And, I just get right into his face. And I said, Bob, I said, I don't care what you do to me. I don't care what you say to me. I love you and Jesus Christ loves you. And he's like, and then there was this black girl way in the background. She's like, yeah, you tell him. That was it. That was the end.
I remember that story. And I remember the girl. Yeah.
And that was the end of the fight. And I turned a foe into a friend. From that point on, he was not my bully, but kind of like my bodyguard. He would defend me when anybody would try to tease me. And, years later, when social media became a thing, I looked him up. And praise God, I found out he was a believer.
Oh, that's good.
He's a Christian today.
Wow.
So
I
Bob,
didn't know the end of the story, but no, that's cool.
Bob, if you're listening, you know who you are, and you know your name's not Bob.
So no, great stories. So so much stuff, and sometimes stuff would happen off campus, right? We would run into people, at the mall or somewhere out, in the wild, and we would deal with them, and it would be a different kind of a situation. So,
and sometimes we would load up our cars and take a trip down to Columbus to the King's Place. So the King's Place was traditionally a concert venue for Southern gospel music. It was kind of like losing traction, and they're like, hey, we got to keep this place open. And so despite the Southern gospel goers, they started inviting Christian bands and Christian heavy metal groups there. And that was one of our ways of witnessing and reaching out. We would get these metalheads who loved metal music. We'd load them in the car and take them down to the King's Place for a night. And, just hoping that the band would minister to them and they'd get saved. Yeah.
And then they would give a free Bible out at the end. So, and we would take one every time because they said, hey, anybody who wants a Bible can have one. And we were like, we'll take it because we knew, because it was hard to, Bibles are expensive, and we wanted to be able to have some to give out for our ministry. But, there's so much, that we could talk about. I remember one of the ideas one time was to fast on Wednesdays, and we would take our lunch money and save it up for Bibles or for Christian music. Yeah. But it's our friend, and I'm gonna mention his name because I think this is funny. Our friend Rick was like, "Hey, I'll give you the money, but I'm not missing lunch. Like, here's the extra money." Yeah. He's like, "I'm hungry and it's time to eat." Yeah.
And Rick, I think he was kind of straddling the fence because I couldn't tell if he was like a metalhead or a preppy.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was a sharp dressed metalhead.
It's a poser.
Yeah. Rick is still rocking out because I saw him at a Christian metal concert a couple weeks ago.
Very nice.
If he happens to see this, yeah.
Well, we can't mention Rick, and we can't mention the Violent Peace. We can't mention these concerts without mentioning the Fid Man.
Okay, well, yeah, I know that guy.
Yeah, so the Fid Man, Kevin Fiddler, he had this like trailer, and so he would throw parties, and we would have a mosh pit like in the middle of his trailer.
In his garage.
Yeah. And slamming ourselves up against the wall and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, yeah, and Kevin, he's still a Christian. He goes to church right down the road. And he doesn't rock as hard as it used to. Okay,
well,
that's what he told me. But he sure did back in the day. And I remember one time we were listening to music in his and he had like a side room, and we busted out all the paneling in the wall because we were dancing.
Oh my God.
And he was like, "I was going to change this anyway," so we just crashed through all the paneling in the wall.
That sounds like a new renovation show that we can start,
Yeah.
Man, I'm jealous.
So Vic,
my friends are boring in high school.
Anyway, sorry to dominate. I want to open it up for questions from you.
Yeah, you got any more stories?
No more jingles. Yeah,
no more jingles. Yeah. No, high school's sort of a blur for me. Now, I went to a huge high school. There was probably like 2,000 plus people. So like you didn't really know too many people because you never had the same you never had someone in your class twice, and I don't know. I do remember sharing Christ all the time with my friends, and they knew I was a Christian, and I would lead my friends to the Lord and whatnot. But I think I was still pretty busted to pieces from junior high. Like junior high was pretty rough for me, and I was still in recovery through high school. So I was really like leery of the peers, and I could have been a contender. I could have made so much more out of high school, but I could have been a contender. But I was so just still in triage after junior high that I think had I had the right people, that's why I'm kind of jealous right now. Because if I had the right people like you guys around me, it would have brought this Vicki out like a lot younger than she actually came out, I think. And because of all the anger and the bitterness and sort of the brokenness I had, other than Stryper, I don't know how you guys knew about all this Christian metal, because like I didn't hear about any. I think I knew Resband, Stryper, and Disciple, maybe Bride, maybe. They were really hard to get. You'd go to your Northwestern bookstore and they'd have all like the Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant. They didn't have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
sounds familiar.
Yeah,
there's no internet. These people aren't going to be in Hit Parade or in Circus, and so I was pretty much. I had a brother who was 2 years older who played guitar, so I kind of just did whatever he did, and so it really is one of my biggest regrets that I got so into the metal. Now, I didn't get into trouble because I didn't have metal friends, because I didn't want to socialize. And so I wasn't out partying. I wasn't getting into trouble. I was a closet metal fan. I would sit at home alone and listen. But when I just think about those messages that were crammed into my head over, like I had a steady appetite of all of and I wasn't really listening to a lot of like the bubblegum metal. I didn't like the Motley Crue and the Poison and all that. So the stuff I was listening to, it was all of like this esoteric stuff and occult stuff and death stuff. It was all about the death.
But you were a Christian.
I was, but I sure was feeding my heart and mind with a bunch of garbage.
Well, and no, I think that's very interesting because you found something in the music that spoke to you.
Mm-hmm.
The sound in the music maybe was a reflection of how you felt.
Totally. I was so angry. I don't know that I would have described myself as angry at the time.
You needed some mortification.
I did, dude.
Vengeance rising. I mean,
I know. If only I had known. I'm just,
Yeah. Well, you know, we don't take it for granted, and we know that we were blessed. We had a very unique situation.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, people knew about us after a while, you know, because our group, you know, kind of grew. And all praise to God. We really, really meant it, and we really cared. I'll tell you what, our pastors didn't know what to do with us. They really didn't, because we liked this music that was unacceptable, but we were sold out to Jesus. And they're like, okay, 2 + 2 is not equaling 4 here. What is wrong with you kids?
Yeah.
So I know you had issues at your church. I had issues at my church. And I mean, we were sold out as much as we can. And I mean, we were, you know, I'll be the first to say we were misguided in some ways, and we weren't totally discipled and weren't mature, you know. So we were doing things that teens did, like rebellion, like piercing our ears and stuff like that. And, you know, our parents were not crazy about it. And
with needles and ice cubes.
Yeah. So because nobody would take us to do it ourselves. But anyway, we meant well. And we meant well when we were trying to intimidate the Satanists.
Well, I think everything that we did, though genuine but misguided, it's not that we pierced our ears because, we want to look cool. We're like, this is a witnessing opportunity. This is a witnessing tool. Everything that we said, did, wore, we try to make it a witnessing tool, right?
Well, Paul said, I become all things to all men, so some might be saved. And we, maybe we took some liberties with that. But I never felt, and I still don't to this day, I mean, God does not look at the outward appearance, obviously, right? And no, I agree. And we did think it was a witnessing tool. We used the music, and we would carry our Bibles to school, but we'd also carry our cassette tapes, because every day people would be like, what is this music? I never heard of this band. By the cover, it looks like something I would be interested in. And I'm like, hey, you want to borrow it? You might like this, you know? Chris, I was trained for every day my alarm would go off. I would reach over with my eyes closed, shut the alarm off, and I would say, Lord, let me witness to somebody today before I open up my eyes. And I'm telling you what, every day the Lord gave me an opportunity to witness to somebody. Now, I was also actively trying to witness to people, you know. So, man, God did some amazing things. And I just want to brag on God, because we're just a couple of morons in high school, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And but God did use us, and some cool things happened. And I think it's kind of cool to share this now, because the listeners now, they just know Tom and Vicki, you know, now. And it's like, okay, how did this start? Did you just get saved, you know, 5 years ago? No, actually, I grew up, you know, in a Christian home with my grandparents. You grew up in a Christian home. So I want you, and there's a lot of things I'd like for you to talk about. So I'm gonna try and interview you for some stuff. You went to Bible college.
Yes.
And they were so concerned about you in Bible college, they sent your pastor from Ohio to Tennessee.
8-hour drive.
Yeah. What were you doing to cause so much trouble?
Okay. So, all right. I went to a very uber conservative Bible college where the dress code was slacks, button-up shirt, a tie.
Oh, wow.
Okay. But they didn't say from what decade or what era. So I would go to the Goodwill and buy these loud polyester shirts with the big wide collars, the big old fat ties, didn't match. And because it's like, I'm not going to be this cookie cutter, you know, Christian everybody expects me to be. It was my way of righteous rebellion. Right. And I remember, like, Tom and I were going
You were technically following the rules.
Yes. I was on paper, I was following the rules. And there was one time where Tom and I don't know if it was some sort of like, I don't remember why we did it, but we painted our pinky nails black.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right? So I don't know if it's because it was cool or there was some symbolism behind it, but I had my pinky nail black. So one day I get this call from the dean of students. And of course, this is Nashville, Tennessee. He's like, well, I would like to speak to you in my office privately. So I came in and I said, yes, sir. What seems to be a problem? He says, well, it's been brought to my attention that you have fingernail polish on your pinky, and I have been informed that it's a sign of homosexuality. Wait, what? So I had to explain to him the whole, Christian metal thing or whatever. So that day I had to go to now my wife. I had to go to her and say, hey, where's your fingernail polish remover? Like, they're just not going to let this go. Right. But yeah, he was right. The pastor drove 8 hours and he never got out of his car.
Oh, really?
He saw me walking down the sidewalk and he stopped and he rolled down the window and expressed his concern. And we probably had a 10-minute conversation. And I was just bewildered. And I was like, I just didn't know what the deal was. And then he said his piece and went back home. And I was just like blown away.
Man, he could have called, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been easier, a lot cheaper, But I grew up in so Mansfield, Ohio. You have a lot of old families from Olive Hill, Kentucky,
Yeah.
and West Virginia. And they moved up during the 60s and 70s because there was no jobs in Kentucky and West Virginia. They got jobs, factory jobs, ended up moving their families there. As a result, you have a lot of churches that were Southern churches, Southern gospel music only, King James version only. So I even though I grew up in Ohio, in a northern Yankee state, I had an extremely Southern upbringing. And a lot of this was through the church. So the church really didn't know what to do with me or how to handle me because they thought that I was just in rebellion. I would go to church wearing White Cross t-shirts with ripped jeans and stuff. And, the preaching would touch my heart and I'd go to the altar and somebody'd come down thinking I was getting saved. Like, no, I'm already saved. I'm just praying here,
Dude. No, and I can relate with that because you would visit, you would meet other kids, other Christian kids. They would invite you to their church and then they would try to get you saved,
Yeah.
The adults were like, oh wow, we got a wild one tonight. We got to get this kid saved, long hair, ripped up jeans. Speaking of the ripped up jeans, one time I came to school and my jeans were so ripped up, they put me in school suspension because they had warned me not to do it. And I had a bracelet on of safety pins. Yeah. And I took that bracelet of safety pins apart and I pinned up the holes in my jeans and they let me out. So
there was another time you got ISS, in school suspension, for wearing a DeGarmo and Key Boycott Hell t-shirt. But yet they would let the kid who wore the Bon Jovi Kicks Biblical Donkey shirt walking around the halls.
And there were all kinds of kids that were breaking the rule. Like you're not allowed to have any kind of t-shirt advertising cigarettes or beer. And that happened all the time.
Yeah.
But I had a shirt that said Boycott Hell, which is, boycott means stop people from going to hell, and put up a picket line.
And Tom wouldn't stand for that. He did his stint in ISS, but he was on the school newspaper. So he wrote an article called "What the Hell's Going On?"
That headline got scratched.
Oh,
that was my original headline. Yeah. They wouldn't let me use that headline. So,
but you did make it into a story.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I was in journalism. I got to write a lot. They let me write opinion pieces in the school newspaper. I think I have them all somewhere.
Now, wasn't New Age Grandy was it he the guy over the
New Age Grandy was the nickname that we called him because we had a teacher named Mr. Grandy who would sometimes suggest that we do like New Age.
He was actually teaching us in class how to have an out-of-body experience.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you got the nickname.
Yeah, we call him New Age Granny. I got to touch on something that you said about, the Christian bookstores, and, you had your Michael W. Smith and all that kind of stuff. Well, we had a bookstore here in Mansfield called The Bookery. And, it was just like what you said. There was primarily Southern gospel. It was starting to venture out into the Amy Grants and the Michael W. Smiths and everything. But we got word that they had the music we liked. But it felt like we were doing like some kind of shady drug deal when we went into the bookstore, because we'd be like, go up to the counter. Hey, man, we want to see the cool drawer. And so the guy behind the counter would be like, pull out this case, and we would be going through, and there'd be like Deliverance and Tourniquet and Vengeance and all that. But it wasn't too long.
They kept it in a drawer behind the counter. And sometimes they'd let us just come around and look through the drawer. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't want to offend their Southern gospel contemporary, patrons. But I guess, they finally started putting it down on the shelf several years after that. But that's
they came out of the closet. Yeah.
Oh man.
Chris, we're jumping around a little bit, but there's another story that, since I have you here, I want you to tell this story, because you used to work at the Baptist bookstore in Nashville, Tennessee, when you lived there.
Oh, yes.
And you met somebody who I'm a big fan of. And the first time you told me this story, I thought I was going to wreck the car, because we were driving down the road, and I'm like, what did you just say? What did you just say? And I couldn't believe that you had met this person. Can you tell the story?
Okay. So this is still in the 90s. And I was working at the Lifeway Christian Bookstore in Nashville, Tennessee, downtown, which has now been demolished. It's no longer there. But it wasn't an oddity or a rarity that a homeless guy would drift into the store, maybe trying to get something to eat or some money or whatever. So it wasn't unusual to see kind of people in ratty clothes come in. But I seen this guy. He had dark, disheveled hair. He had on gray, grimy sweatpants and kind of a tattered plaid button-up shirt, flannel shirt. And he was hanging around quite a long time. And I was like, oh, what's this dude's story? I wonder what he's all about. Well, he walks up to the counter, and as soon as he gets there, he goes, hello. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're Johnny Cash.
No way.
He was dressed that way so nobody would recognize him because he was so famous. And so, being a metalhead, I couldn't help but remember that One Bad Pig did a cover of Man in Black and had Johnny sing on it. So I asked him, what did you think of Paul Kupek and Kosher Womack and the One Bad Pig guys? He said, well, they were very nice boys.
Yeah, that's an amazing story to me. But the way you told the story, you just told it so nonchalant. One time. Yeah, I met Johnny Cash one time.
Wow.
I don't remember being that nonchalant.
Yeah, I'm just like it was nothing, like, hey, one day, I met Johnny Cash.
So Tom, unless I am remembering it correctly, because you lived in Tennessee once too, were you guys together? Like, were you at the same time? Were you both in Tennessee?
Actually, he moved down there for college. And then he met his wife and ends up getting married. Were you in school at the time when you guys got married, or after?
Yes, I got married mid-semester of my junior year of Bible college.
Yeah, and then I think I moved down a year or two after. I actually got married and then moved down to Tennessee. And we had another friend down there from high school, who my friend Greg, who we were roommates with. Yeah, and anyway. So whenever we could, we would meet up, somewhere in Tennessee. I would come over to, the campus and hang out. It wasn't a lot because we were busy working, busy school and all that stuff. But we did get to see each other once in a while. So it was kind of cool. Like, hey, we're in the same town. So
now you moved down after I got married, right?
No, because
you were in my wedding.
I was in your wedding. So I lived there when you got married.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, anyway, we were there for different reasons at the same time. I moved down because I was looking for work, and I was looking for a change of pace of Mansfield. And I had friends that lived down there. I was like, man, this looks like a cool place to live.
And that was when Pastor Bob moved from California to Nashville.
And one of the reasons I did it was because I wanted to find a way to get into film, making film. You know, it never worked out for me in Tennessee. I finally did years later, but
Should we tell her about the mashed potatoes vampire?
Well, we did a lot of experimental. I forgot about that actually, because you came back and we did some experimental type film, little shorts and stuff. And I was working with filters and stuff. And I told him to get in the bathtub and just like, we were just like making it up on the spot. Yeah.
But we're putting some spiritual symbolism to it. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. But,
oh my gosh.
You remember those dining room tables that was just a glass top? So, okay, he had that. And I don't even remember what it was about, but he had the camera underneath the table. He had some instant mashed potatoes sitting on top of the glass table, and he was on top of it just eating it. And
it was dyed red. Yeah,
it was dyed red. I don't know,
does this still exist? Does this film still exist?
No, it might exist. I don't know. Some of it exists.
Wow.
So
oh my gosh.
But it was shortly after that you kind of did an extension to the Violent Peace Ministries called Vampire Outreach.
Yeah.
So maybe that was kind of like part of what it was about, or
not to boast, but we were way ahead of our time. Okay.
Yeah, we were.
I'm not. Yeah. Anyway, we were thinking outside of the box. So, you know, we took "Do Not Conform to the Pattern of This World" very seriously. Okay. Hence the thumbnail for tonight. Do not conform. When it came to wardrobe, and when it came to not conforming to the world, like it says in Romans chapter 12, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
See, our whole thing was, one of the inspirations was James Hudson Taylor. He was an English missionary to China, and talk about being ahead of his time. That guy was ahead of his time because these English missionaries were going over in three-piece suits, and they were sharing the gospel, but they were also sharing their Western culture, you know, trying to incorporate the Western culture within the gospel message, therefore changing the dynamic of the nation. And James Hudson Taylor just totally flipped things on its head. He didn't go down in an English tweed suit. He grew a ponytail. He wore the Chinese robes and those little, symbol looking hats. He worked out in the rice fields with right beside the Chinese. And he won more Chinese to the Lord than all of those English missionaries combined. And we took that with what Paul said in one of the letters to the Corinthians, that, I am all things to all men. And, and by doing so, I might reach some. And so we decided that it was up to us, because nobody else was doing it, to reach out to the heavy metal subculture, because all there was these preachers and pastors, God bless them, in three-piece suits, but they couldn't connect and reach out to these headbangers.
So, yeah, and again, this is already mentioned, but there's no, God is no respecter of persons on how they dress or what they look like. There's nothing wrong with wearing a leather jacket or having long hair or, or whatever, or earrings or, whatever. It was looked down upon at the time, and it was very controversial at the time. It was, it was basically worse than, just as bad as getting a tattoo in the 90s, right? So, getting your ear pierced or your ears pierced or whatever. So, I like, Chris, you do a lot of good impressions, but some of my favorite impressions are of your mom, because your sweet mom was really worried about us.
She was.
Yeah. And she, tell this story a little bit about, she was worried about us like going out at night because she's afraid the rapture was going to happen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
oh my word.
This was during Desert Storm.
Okay, yeah. And
it was Desert Storm. And that day, I think, everything at school, all the teachers were heavily talking about the war, Desert Storm. And we were just getting so laden and heavy and down and depressed by all this, negative news. And we thought, you know what, we just need to get our minds off this, and we need to just go out and blow some steam and have some fun. And so my mom is sitting down watching the news. And so there was that threat in Desert Storm that Israel was going to be attacked, right? So she was so concerned about that. And so my mother, she's from the hills of Kentucky. So she has she never lost her twang.
Oh, no.
She's sitting down there and her brows were furrowed and she just had this worried, concerned look on her face. And I said, Mom, me and the guys, we're going to go out and go roller skating. And she was like, oh, Chris, I really don't want you to go out tonight. I'm like, why, Mom? Like, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? It's like, no, because if they attack Israel, what if Jesus comes back? And I was like, Mom, if he comes back, I'm going too. We may go in separate locations, but we're going to meet in the air. And I said, I'm going.
Oh, man. I've never really envisioned the rapture with people with those roller skates banging around, though. I wouldn't want to get one of those on the side of the head.
No, you can't get to heaven in roller skates.
Roller skates. Maybe that's what she was worried about.
In our town, Christian skate night was Thursday night.
Oh.
So
yeah.
They played Christian rock, and then sometimes we would sneak in we would say, hey, we would queue up a tape and take it up there to the DJ and be like, hey, play this song next or whatever, you know.
Nice. Nice.
And
did they have a battle of the bands at your roller?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did we sneak some urgent message in?
Maybe we did.
Or Weeping Prophet?
Urgent Message, Weeping Prophet, local Christian bands. Matter of fact, the lead singer of the band Urgent Message was in my movie Detestable. So yeah.
They were competing with Busted Skull. Remember
Busted Skull, yeah.
That was a secular local band.
Were you
Busted Wig?
Busted Wig, that's
Busted
right.
Wig.
Yeah, that's right.
I like Busted Skull.
Yeah, Busted Wig. Yeah, I was like Busted Skull.
Yeah, Busted Wig.
Busted Wig. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Were you with us when we met the band Bag of Cats?
I don't think.
Okay,
I don't think so.
All right. We went to the streets somewhere in Ohio. We met a band. So we used to do street evangelism, and go down to after high school, and on the weekends and stuff, we would go down to Columbus once we got our license, and on High Street, witness, going to the fair. I remember getting in a fight with the alternative lifestyle group at the Ohio State Fair.
I don't think I was there for that.
No, maybe not. We were down there seeing Petra, and I think you went down with your church, and I went down with my church. And Vicki, by the way, she's a big Petra fan. Beat the era, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
And they had a little track at their booth that said what Jesus said about homosexuality, and you open it up and it's blank. And that's the last thing I remember. I blacked out.
You went all holy and ultra on them,
dude. I got so angry. Yeah. And my friends were standing back a ways. Of course, like I'm, 15, 16 years old or whatever. And again, folks, very well meaning, but not really discipled, not really trained to do these things. But
and we had a desire to be mentored and discipled, but because we were so outside of the box, there was nobody that was willing to take us on.
That's true. That's very true.
So, I mean, it sort of kind of wasn't our fault in that way, because we kept seeking mature, older Christians to try to take us under their wing, and nobody ever would.
Well, Chris, that's so true, because I would call pastors up and I said, hey, we're reaching people here, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any credentials. I'm not ordained. I don't know what to do. Can I be accountable to you? And people let us down time after time after time. And it really did some damage to me, because I did what Paul talked about, where he's like, just because somebody says you're not part of the body doesn't mean you're not part of the body. Right. But I felt like I wasn't part of the body, because they wouldn't, they wouldn't have fellowship with me. Yeah. So,
and then that verse where Paul told Timothy, let no man despise thy youth. And like, we were being despised because we weren't the cookie cutter good boy, good girl, you know, wearing Izod polo shirts and khaki pants kind of Christians.
So, and again, folks, Chris, I love having you here. It's fun to talk about all this stuff, and it's a lot of nostalgia, remembering these days. I just want to give all glory to God for everything that we did, all the fruit. But here's an example. This is something that happened after high school, but this is, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this because of the glare, but this is a newspaper article about us. And it says, intense trio prays to plant a seed, violent peace, a different kind of ministry. And there was a write-up in the newspaper about us because we used to go down to the street. And Chris, you're not in this because you were in.
I was in college.
You were in college.
Yep.
But we have a friend, Matt, here, who you didn't know. But then our friend Corey, who was in high school with us, is in this picture as well.
He was part of the fruit of the ministry.
Yeah, and he was part of the fruit, and then that's me in the middle there. So anyway, but God was doing something back then. Of course, God is still doing something now. Now, you and I, even though we went our separate ways, we stayed in contact.
Oh yeah.
You know, all these years and remained good friends. And talk about going our separate ways. You went way your separate way into a whole nother country. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that we can talk about. I want to talk about whatever, but you recently had some crazy things happen with you because you know, the Reader's Digest version is, Chris, you went to Bible college, okay, but then the Lord spoke to you about becoming, can you explain it?
Okay. Well, so mid-semester of my junior year, like shortly after my wife and I got married, we were commuting from Springfield, Tennessee to Nashville to go to school. And so I was in a very low point in my Christian life where God felt a million miles away, where I felt totally tapped out, like I've peaked. This is it. This is as good as it gets. And it was a rainy day, and my wife was driving.
This was over 30 years ago.
Yeah, this is over 30 years ago. And my wife's driving, and I'm just kind of like leaning my head against the window, watching the beads of rain kind of slowly going down the window as we're driving to school. And in my heart, I'm praying this. I'm like, Lord, I mean, have I sinned? I mean, is there something that I did that's separating me from you? It's like you feel like a million miles away. I can't think of anything. And I'm like, Lord, is this it? Is this all there is to the Christian life? And I'm not saying that the Lord spoke audibly to me, but it was like one of those almost audible moments where you just knew that you knew in your spirit and in your head what the Lord was saying. And he said, get back to the first century. And I was like, well, that's strange. It doesn't even seem like it connects to what I'm asking about or talking about. And then again, he repeated, get back to the first century. And of course, like with Abraham and like with all the other patriarchs, he had to say it like at least 3 times for me to get it through my thick skull. And then when he said it the last time, I felt this peace come over me. Like, okay, you didn't really answer my question, but I feel a peace. And that began my journey. And mind you, I was cramming 4 years of Bible college into 5. And so I was studying Bible and missions, and they never taught this. They never taught this in Bible college about the first century believers and how up until Acts 15, it was a totally Jewish movement. And so I was exploring the first century believers, how they believed, how they acted, what they did. And then at the same time, the Lord was leading me down the path of my genealogy. Now, my wife was adopted. She had no idea who her birth parents were, etc. I didn't really know much about my lineage. And so as I'm kind of digging into, the roots of my family tree, I discovered that there's Jewish lineage on both sides. And I was already at that time, because I was studying the first century believers, I felt really compelled to try to live like Yeshua lived, do what Yeshua did, and try to be a first century believer in the 21st century. So this kind of led me down the path of what is termed Messianic Judaism. So my wife and I started, practicing Messianic Judaism. We really didn't know what we were doing. But lo and behold, in the midst of that, her birth mother contacted her and said, I'm your mother, and you're basically a Russian Jew. So it's like, here's two people who were raised Free Will Baptist, two people who were raised in Gentile Protestantism, get married only to find out while they're in the process of practicing Messianic Judaism that they've been Jews all along, which is just crazy. I mean, talk about divine providence. And I think another thing that really influenced me is at that time, the Bible college was smack dab in the middle of a historical section of Nashville on West End Avenue. And right next door to the Bible college was an Orthodox Jewish synagogue. And I would sneak in there on Saturdays and sit in the back and just listen and observe. And my heart was just burning and totally drawn to this. And I just didn't know why. And then when all this came out, it's like, okay, I understand why now.
Wow. No. So super cool. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, like you said, it's been over 30 years. Okay, since we lived in Nashville, and a lot of things have happened in my life and in your life. You moved back to Mansfield, and then eventually you moved back to, well, you didn't move back to, but you moved to Canada where your wife is from. Right. And that's where you've been living for 20 years.
Well, since my daughter, like, she was just real little. I think she was 6 years old. So she's 23, 24 now.
Okay.
So yeah, ever since then.
So, and I'll never forget when you told me that you accepted a job as a pastor. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I'm already having trouble explaining because people are coming up to me like, what's going on with Chris? I don't know. I don't know how to explain it to you. What's going on with Chris, except for he is practicing, he's a Messianic Jew, and I explained some things to him. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm really confused. Okay. So now you accept, just a few years ago, excuse me, a job as a pastor. Okay. Mm-hmm. So how did that happen?
Okay. So I've got a good buddy of mine, and he runs a street ministry in Plaster Rock called Harvest House. And so he and we kind of tag team preach. So they have what's called the celebration service on Saturday nights, and we'll take every other Saturday and preach. Well, the church, the United Baptist Church down the road, was without a pastor. And so the deacon was attending these Saturday night services. And one evening he pulls me to the side. He said, hey, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. He said, would you consider being the pastor of our church, speaking at our church? And I was like, whoa. Like, hang on a second. I said, you realize I'm Jewish, right? Yeah. You realize I don't keep the same holidays as you do, right? Yeah. And you know that when I preach, I'm going to be coming from a Messianic first century Jewish believer kind of standpoint, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, if you still want me, I'll give it a shot kind of thing. But then he kind of got a little concerned. He says, well, what are you going to do around Easter time? I said, well, I will not preach about Easter, but I will preach about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Oh, okay. Well, what about Christmas time? Because you don't celebrate Christmas. Well, no. But when that time comes around, I will preach about the birth of Jesus Christ. He's like, okay, we can live with that. So of course I had my honeymoon period where everybody loved me and everybody was my friend, but that certainly didn't last long. And digging into the history of that church, I discovered that the average stay for a pastor was approximately 3 years. There were few exceptions. A couple guys made it to the 5-year, 10-year stint, but mostly it was 3 years. And I quickly find out what the reason was for that. So, yeah, I guess that's.
Well, no. And then just a few years ago, of course, the whole world had this crazy event called C-19. Okay, we got to be careful about. I don't know what the rules are. Okay, anymore. So, but there was a lockdown. There were all kinds of rules. Your country, that you're living in Canada, was especially psycho when it came to this stuff. Okay, and yes, I'm embarrassed about Barack Obama and Joe Biden, but man, I'm embarrassed for you guys about the leader that you guys have now. So, and what's happening in there. So the church just wanted to stay in lockstep with the government. And this was very conflicting for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was that like?
Well, I did my very best to try to accommodate and bend over backwards without compromising the word of God or my personal convictions. And of course, when it first happened, nobody knew what it was really all about. Nobody knew what was going on. So we all played it safe at first, and everybody did everything that the government said, that, you know, because we didn't know what this was.
Right.
And then once we started digging in and understanding that this was actually a planned scamdemic type thing, you know, we just think, okay, let's pump the brakes, let's slow down, let's ask some hard questions and kind of get to the bottom of this. But the board of this particular church, they were made up of these old school men and women who, you know, they were, you know, in World War II, and, you know, the boys need socks, so, you know, we're going to give up our wool. The boys need meat, so we're just going to eat organ meat. We're going to sacrifice for the cause. And, you know, they believed that every single thing the government told them was the gospel truth. And so same with this, they weren't conspiratorial minded in any sense or any stretch of the imagination. And they would always try to fall back on that Romans passage where you obey the laws of the land, obey the laws of the
Romans
land.
13.
Yeah. And they're totally taking that out of context. That's not what that's about at all. And so I started seeing, as this whole thing started progressing, that this is the exact same playbook as the Nazis did in Germany right before the Holocaust. And we were supposed to sign our names and our telephone numbers, log in when we came to church, because in case somebody had the vid, and, you know, we wanted to contact everybody, make sure, hey, you were in contact. And it's like, I'm not signing my name. I said, I'm the pastor. They know I'm going to be there, so it's kind of pointless for me. And, you know, it got to the point to where, you know, they wanted you to wear a mask in the service, but you couldn't even sing even with a mask. And that's when I started having some major problems, and I started drawing the line. I said, look, I said, what happened with Daniel when Daniel wasn't allowed to pray for 30 days to his God? He says, I don't care. I don't give a flying flip. I'm doing it anyway. Tough noogies for you. And I said, they're telling us not to sing. Singing is a form of prayer. Some of these songs are literally prayers to God. So the government is saying by us not singing that we can't pray. And so they were still wanting to accommodate, because they were threatened with fines. If some kind of, you know, vid cop came in and saw us singing, we could be fined. And I said, look, put the fine on me. Let me take that financial responsibility, because we're singing, we're doing this. And this really split the church apart. I mean, it was just kind of ripping it to shreds. And that's exactly what it was planned to do, right? So then it got to the point where they were talking about COVID passports. Whoops, I said the C word.
It's okay.
They were talking about passports where you could not enter anywhere or do anything without a passport saying that you have had the vaccinations. And that's where I said, no, we're not doing this, because that's not what churches are about. They're free, open for anybody and everybody. And so we had a lot of major problems and issues. And if I can maybe make a little plug for Rebel News, Sheila Gunn put out an excellent documentary you can find on Rumble called The Church Under Fire. And
that is a good video.
It leaves it wide open for a part 2, because she interviews virtually every pastor that was fined or imprisoned for going against the narrative. And then they ended it with a pastor that's starting to fight against the LGBTQ AI plus kind of movement, because he is getting fined and arrested for all that. So there might be a part 2. But I remember the last board meeting. Well, I preached a very controversial message. I said, I have failed you. And that was the message, because I was trying to, you know, say that, you know, I wasn't really prepared for this whole, you know, vid thing. And, you know, I failed you as a pastor. I should have done better, and I'm going to do better. And, you know, because now we know what this is, and this is what we're going to. And so this really rattled the board. The board thought that they were my leash, that, you know, that they could tug on and pull me back whenever they thought that I was going too far. But that's not what a board of a church is supposed to be. The board is supposed to support the pastor in what he feels the Lord is calling him to do for that church and for that ministry. But no, they were basically my bludgeoning instrument. I was their whipping boy. And so after this controversial sermon, they called me in and wanted me to explain what I meant by that sermon. I said, look, I didn't beat around the bush. I was pretty plain. I wasn't ambiguous in any way. And I used their own playbook against them. I opened up their bylaws and I said, these bylaws tell you what your powers are, none of which is to grill me or to question me on my sermons. And I said, so I'm not going to answer your questions. And they were like, well, why are you against the vaccine? And why won't you wear a mask? And I'm trying to explain the very best, but it's just not getting through. And finally, this old guy, totally out of context, totally, he got up and he's like, you're a Trump supporter. You're a Trump supporter. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? I never showed my hand of my political persuasions at all. And he was mad because I called Blaine Higgs out from the pulpit because you're not supposed to mix religion and politics. Well, I'm sorry, you can't separate the two. And because Blaine Higgs claims to be a born-again Christian, but he was going along with this narrative and not questioning it when he should have. He should have been fighting for the churches. You could go to Walmart and be surrounded by total strangers from God knows where, from how many villages and cities and whatever, but you can't go to your church with people that you know you're safe with. It just didn't make sense. It wasn't line up. You can go to nudie bars, you can go to wherever, but you couldn't go to church. We even had to have like parking lot services at one point where we were all in our cars and I was standing out in the parking lot preaching. I mean, it just got insane and ridiculous. So that was pretty much the nail in the coffin. In that board meeting, I basically, shortly after that, I wrote a letter of resignation because people said, oh, stay and fight, stay and fight. I said, look, they invited me to preach and be their pastor. I'm not part of their denomination. This isn't my, I don't have a dog in the fight here. This is their church. And it's like, they've had so many church splits and so many pastors leave. I did not want to be a part of that problem and traumatize the church again with another church split and people taking sides. So I made the choice easy for him. I said, I'm out of here. And shortly after that, that's when the Lord called my wife and I to start the Root of Yeshua congregation, which we meet at Harvest House at my buddy's ministry. They're letting us use the facilities for free. So we meet Saturday afternoons at 2, and midweek service is Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. And so there's a few from the Baptist church that followed me there because they were just so tired and disgruntled with all of the politics, the church politics and the hypocrisy and the low-handed, dirty stuff that was going on.
Right. Well, I've told you this before, but now that I have you here, I want to say, man, I am so proud of you, man.
Well, as you say, brother, all glory to God, man. All glory to God. It's
it makes sense that you and I would be the ones, right?
Yeah.
To stand up to this craziness. Vic, he's all yours. Any questions, any comments?
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I got to be careful how I say this because I know we can't take every single pastor out there in the world because there are some.
No.
But if you're a pastor with zeal to preach the full counsel of God, Genesis 1:1 all the way to the end of Revelation, you're not going to have a pulpit in the coming days. Right. It's just the way it's going to be. And so, kudos to you. And it's been cool hearing your guys' stories, because you easily could have just come on and we could have started the story from when you got this pastorate in Canada, but getting the foundation under that, it's just really cool because my story, and it's a lot of people's story, is you're a Christian as a kid, but you're really immature in your faith. And it's not until you get older that you realize really how important that is. And to see another way for that story to be told where you guys had zeal as kids. And I just don't think that if you're going to have that much zeal, there's just no way that zeal isn't going to come into contention with the world or with the tares in the church, because that's the thing. We want to divide everything in the church to like there's the believers, and then there's the new believers, and then there's like these trolls that come in to stir up all the trouble. But with tares, that's a little bit different. I don't think tares know that they're tares. They're these believers, and they don't know that they're being used as a pawn. There's some sort of weakness there. There's some sort of open door there, and they're not doing the will of God. They are being used as a tare to pull the church apart. And so I don't hear too many victory stories where the pastor who's preaching the full counsel of God usually comes out on top in those situations once it gets away from them. But yeah, it's encouraging to me, because I know in the last 4 years, I've been looking for and surrounding myself with the people who were absolutely unapologetic in 2020 and beyond, like to the point of, this was me and my dad's stance too. My dad's 78 years old, and he's like, if I go to prison, I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. I'm not doing this. And that was what I was raised under. And I do think the one kind of cool thing about 2020 is, ever since high school, you guys and got people like you, Christians like you, everybody always talks about, well, if I win the lottery, I'll give it to the church. We always talk about what we do if we win the lottery, but you don't know until you actually do. Until you actually have $3 million sitting in your lap, you really don't know if you are going to handle it ethically or morally. You really don't until it's tested. And most of us have spent our whole lives in a non-persecution situation here in America. And we talk about what we're going to do at the end of the world, and what we're going to do, and we're going to spit in their face, and you really don't know how much courage you have until it's tested. And I really do think that 2020 kind of separated the men from the boys in a sense. And it doesn't mean that the boys weren't Christians, but we've got people drinking milk and we've got people eating meat. And I think that the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's kind of boiled to the surface in 2020. And I hope they continue to boil to the surface. And if we get a second iteration of this, I hope the people that weren't the Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego's the first time around take inspiration and have taken inventory of their life. And I hope they become the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's the second time around. I hope they redeem themselves.
What a time to be alive. Chris and Vicki too, you can relate with this. I remember in high school watching movies like we would watch, like A Thief in the Night, these cheesy old Christian movies.
Terrifying.
And there was a lot of talk about the rapture in the end. And we're like, God, we're just getting started. We want to live life.
Yeah.
But sometimes I thought, we're not going to get to live life. God's going to come back, and it's not going to happen. Well, here we are in our 50s now, and you know what? I got a lot more life to live, but I'm blessed, and I'm just so thankful every day, and giving thanks to God just for every breath that I take and everything that He's given me. And we've just seen so many great things, and so much answered prayer, and so much blessing from God, and rescue from God, healing from God, deliverance and salvations and miracle stories. I'm ready for more. But we're living in a time where it was always a bunch of warning. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this could happen. This is a real thing. Y2K. This could really happen, but it didn't. This could really happen, but it didn't. And then we heard all of this stuff for so long. And I've told this story before. When 2020 came along, people were talking about, C-19. And I was like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. And as it's happening, I'm like, no, this is not happening. I don't believe it's happening. And I was trying to will it away. And I'm going to the grocery store with my wife, and there's nothing there's nothing in the back stock, and they're limiting the amount of toilet paper you're allowed to buy. And I'm like, I think this might be happening. And then, of course, after that, there were the riots and just crazy chaos. Pastor Sean and I did a show last night called Chaos is Coming. And the conclusion of that show was, hey, we know this, but we have peace in Christ. So no matter what happens, we win. And we shouldn't let any of this stuff rattle us. We should be, we should be concerned, and we should prepare, and we should get some plans and stuff. But as Christians, we know where our peace comes from. So,
well, I have people that are begging me to move back to the United States, to move home. And I'm like, really, what's the point? Because, I might get 5 extra years, maybe 10 at best. I said, but what's happening in Canada is coming to the United States. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer has been such an inspiration to me, because he was there in Nazi Germany, a pastor standing for the truth, but at the same time being involved with the group that was planning the assassination of Adolf Hitler. And they were after him. And at one point, he made it across the border and escaped Nazi Germany. And the Lord said, no, you get your little bottom right back there. Because he said, the Lord was like, we need you there. I need you here. And I keep telling people, I know you mean well. I know you love me. You care about my future and my safety, but I can't move back home, because they need pastors in Canada. They need somebody like a Dietrich Bonhoeffer to stand up for the truth. And it's not to say that the Lord's going to protect me to the very end on that, because he didn't with Dietrich, because he died. He was martyred the day before Allied forces came and liberated that particular camp he was in. And because of the laws they have passed in Canada, one of these is these internet laws, which, is against hate speech, and they are retroactive. So anything that you have previously posted is fair game, that if the government truly wanted to, they can really dig deep into my, YouTube or Facebook account, and I could literally be fined or arrested for something that I preached or said or post that was prior to these internet laws. It's retroactive. So I'm trying to prepare my family and my congregation that, I may have to go to jail. I may be incarcerated. I may be imprisoned. And I'm trying to prepare my family and my congregation for that. Because it's like, if you stand for the truth, that's going to happen for you. They did it to these, handful of pastors during C-19. They were literally imprisoned, putting in maximum security, like they were some kind of heinous offenders. And trying to intimidate them to shut up, cease and desist, stop preaching and saying what you're saying. But they were willing to die. And like you said, you don't know what you're going to do when you come right down to it. But I pray that the Lord gives me the strength and the grace that if I have to go behind bars or something like that, God forbid, happens, that I'll give him the glory for it.
It's so bizarre to me, because the Lord has opened up a door for me to be involved in a church during this time. And I've been having these conversations with the leadership of my church. And we talked about C-19, and we talked about the lockdowns. And I said, this was a test, and many churches failed, and I said, the next test is going to be even more difficult. Mm-hmm. I don't know what God is going to do with me, and I'm not sure what's happening, but here I am in leadership at this church. And I'm thinking these same things, and I'm having these same conversations and warning people. We don't know what's going to happen, but we need to be prepared. And it could get really bad really quick. And, and I'm using Canada as an example. Mm-hmm. I asked somebody that was on the board, I said, hey, do you know what the MAID program is? And I said, he said, no, I never heard of it. And I explained it to him. Medical assistance in dying is a program in Canada. So I said, the government is actively trying to kill us. Okay. And that's an example that's happening in Canada. It's here in America. They're killing babies. Okay. They're murdering babies in America, and they'll implement this, as soon as they possibly can. Yeah. Programs like this.
Medically assisted suicide. You have veterans from Canada that are calling with mental health issues or with physical ailments, and they're calling the Veteran Services of Canada. And you know what their first suggestion is now? No. Take the cocktail. Mm-hmm. Do yourself in.
Yeah. They'll say stuff like, well, we can't help you here. We can't help you here, but we do have this MAID service that might be of assistance to you. Gosh. And that's what they're saying. And they're saying the same thing to people that are paralyzed, that are homeless, that are depressed. Okay, they're doing this, and there's even a commercial out there, and it looks like a trailer for a movie.
Yeah.
But it's a commercial for suicide, for medically government-assisted suicide.
And put your tinfoil hat on, because what happened in the United States with the election, I believe with all my heart happened in Canada, because there is no way, in my mind, in my estimation of things, that Trudeau could have gotten back in. And people, oh, well, it was Ontario and Quebec that carried him through. No, because, okay, there are flags being sold and flags being posted in people's yards, almost every other house where I'm at, that has F Trudeau on it. Nobody likes the guy. His wife had all this prestige and power and money, and he must have been so much of a jerk that she didn't even care, and she left him, like divorced him. And there's this conspiracy theory that he's actually the love child of Fidel Castro. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But the point is that the nation doesn't want him. So how in the world did he get in?
Yeah.
How did Biden get in? Probably the same way, because it just blows my mind. And he's been able to do so much damage. And he should be behind bars right now, because the courts deemed what he did during the truckers' protest as, you stepped over the line, you abused your power, you did wrong. Well, why is he still in office? Why is he behind bars?
Wicked man. And we have him here too. So I want to ask you this. Living outside of the country, is there any kind of perspective that you can see? Now, you're still very much American, and you're still very much tuned in to American politics. And most people around the world are. The only problem is America knows nothing about what's going on in other places. But is there any kind of perspective that you can see looking at America, and especially during this time? I mean, this is a big deal, this election. And there's a lot of talk about a lot of different things. I liked it when somebody explained it like this: the house is on fire and we need a firefighter. Okay. And our hope is that Trump will be that firefighter. I don't think they're going to give up power. Okay. I could be wrong. I don't think they will. But do you have a perspective from where you're living now?
You mean for American politics or Canadian politics?
I mean, what are people around you saying when they're looking at America?
Well, a lot of the Canadians are very placid. So they don't have that American spirit to revolt. America, we revolted against England. We wanted a place. They still have the Queen on their money, right? They still love the royal family. So they're very placid. They like to complain and talk a big talk, but ultimately, it's all bark and no bite. There's really no fight. So I really don't. There are pockets and handfuls of people that are standing up and fighting against, but I'm not sure if it's ever going to be enough. But Canadians have drunk the CNN Kool-Aid, and they're all pretty much, they got Trump derangement syndrome. And people keep asking me, how can you vote for such a wicked man or support such a? I said, look, it's one of these choices where you got to pick the lesser of two evils. I'm not saying that Trump's a saint. He's just kind of the lesser of two evils. And I said, just ignore what he says, because he's not a golden-tongued politician. I said, pay attention to what he does. I can't complain against anything he's done, any of the policies. He's done everything that was right for America, but he just didn't say what people wanted him to say. So if you just kind of turn down the volume and just look at what he does, you can't argue against that. But yet Canadians are, they believe what CNN's telling them, and they're against him and they hate him. The majority of them, like I said, there's few pockets, and it's almost like Alberta is probably the rebellious province, because they said if they're going to do another lockdown, we're not wearing masks. The majority of the people said, not again. We're not doing this again. And so they're kind of out west, right? So they have that Western spirit kind of thing, that frontiersman, independent spirit.
Cowboys,
and so New Brunswick is kind of part of those. It's the maritime provinces, and it's part of like the Eastern Seaboard. So we're influenced a lot by, Massachusetts and Maine. And so that's very liberal politics, and it just kind of bleeds up into New Brunswick.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wow. Well, no, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I don't see a way out of this where there's not violence. I hope there's not. I hope, I would like a reprieve. I feel like we got a reprieve in 2016 and we got time. And I guess I think our message is, okay, yeah, I would encourage you to vote, even though it seems like the system is rigged and there's no doubt that they're stealing elections and things like that. But more important than voting, we need to repent.
Yes.
We need to repent. That's what's going to change.
Daniel 9.
Yeah.
And Ezekiel or Ezra 9.
So Americans want to vote their way out of this, and we can't vote our way out of this. We have to repent our way out of this. I think.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and they're like, man, if we could just get Trump in there, he can save us. No, Jesus needs to save us.
Yeah.
That's the only one that can save us. And everybody wants their way of life. They don't want their way of life messed with. Okay. But anyway, Vic, any questions, comments?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. That's kind of what I've been repeating for 4 years. These things might be beneficial to us and help us, and there's going to be things that are better than, some options are better than other options, but ultimately, with all the blood we have soaking into the ground, with all of the dung we haven't cleaned up in the camp, we need repentance first, or we don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of a few tour portions ago. They were talking about finding like a body, and they don't know who murdered that person. And so all of the elders of the surrounding cities would make a measurement and see which city was the closest. And basically they had to wash their hands and repent to say, we had no part of this. We didn't know about this, because blood pollution was such a prevalent thing in the Hebraic mindset. And just think how saturated with blood Canada and the United States is with abortion and euthanasia and just the random murders on the street. And trafficking and things like that. And I mean, we need to repent.
Yeah,
we need to repent. And they had to basically decapitate a heifer in the brook in order, innocent blood had to be shed to cover that blood guilt, that guilty blood.
Last night, Pastor Sean and I were saying that we need to pray to change the spiritual climate.
Yeah.
Okay. And that prayers of repentance. Okay. Spiritual warfare prayers, prayers of authority, pushing back, and closing the demonic doors that have been opened up. So,
well, and, I think we've got to change the wording of our prayers, because we are disassociating and detaching ourselves from the sin of the nations. That's not what Daniel did. You read Daniel 9, and Daniel never murdered anybody. Daniel never killed anybody. Daniel never cheated anybody and all this kind of stuff. But he says, we have sinned. He put himself in the collective of Israel and said, I'm a part of this people. I'm a part of this nation. I didn't do anything personally, but I'm a part of this nation, and I'm in exile with the rest of them. Yeah. And I need to repent like the rest of them. And so we need to approach God in the same way. Maybe you've never had an abortion. Maybe you've never killed anybody. Maybe you've never cheated or what have you. But you need to confess these sins as if you've done them, because you're a part of them, because you're a part of this nation and a part of these countries.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we have authority, whatever authority we have to repent on with the authority that we have, whether over, in our city, in our office, whatever,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Nehemiah prayed that way as well. It was we prayers.
Yeah.
Very, very noticeably.
And that's part of our Western mindset, because Western civilizations are so individualistic.
Yep.
It's about the unholy trinity, me, myself, and I. And we are not communally minded as the Hebrews were, as ancient Israel was. And we need to get back to that. We need to learn how to do that. And I almost declined your offer to come on this show because, I just kind of have been feeling that the Lord has kind of been wanting me to kind of like step back, because the nature and the way things are in Canada, I think God is wanting me to kind of fly under the radar, because I used to have podcasts and websites and all this kind of stuff, but I kept falling flat on my face. And I'm like, Lord, why? And he's like, I don't want a target on your back. So I prayed and I consulted some accountability partners of mine, and they said, no, you need to do this because people need to know what's going on in Canada. They need to know what you've gone through and what the believers are going through and what's the next step in the parade, because it's not about you and it's not about your visibility, because I've taken down all the website. The only thing I have is a Rumble channel, and it's mostly for my congregation who can't be there for that particular service or whatnot, you know. So I think that's why the Lord wanted me to accept this invitation, is to bring awareness to what's going on,
bring exposure, and bring warning as well.
Because what's happening in Canada is going to come to the United States. Because, like I said, if I move back, how much more time do I got? 3, 5, 10 years at best.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, well, I'm glad you did accept the invitation. It's been so much fun.
Well,
talking to you.
I'll be honest with you. I really did it for all the free T-shirts.
Yeah, for the merch. Yeah. Well, yeah, that was the point of no return. So, anyway, so Chris, you're familiar, obviously, with Vicki Joy, and it's kind of fun. We've been talking about how everything kind of comes full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you know me well enough. I got connections through Vicki, right? And I know some people, but it wasn't anything I did. God did it all, right?
Right.
And that's what I keep telling my wife. I'm like, I don't know what happened. God did this. I barely graduated high school, okay? And that was a lot for me. So for whatever reason, I'm rubbing elbows with a lot of people that you listen to, but not because I told you to, because you were listening to them separately.
Right.
You know? And then it makes sense that we're like-minded, and that we kind of, come together on the same types of, things that we listen to, like, because you mentioned before Derek and Sharon, you mentioned Skywatch TV, and you were very excited, about the possibility of Vicki joining us today. And we talked about the confessionals. We talked about what's
Blurry Creatures.
Okay.
The Bump podcast with Bo. Is that the guy?
Oh,
Bo?
The Bump. Yeah. Bo Kennedy. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like I'm listening to these podcasts, and it's kind of like one of these Leonardo DiCaprio Once Upon a Time in Hollywood moments. I'm listening to these podcasts, and then Tom's name gets dropped. I know that guy. And I got to share with you, Vicki, a story. I have somebody in my congregation that's coming out of Catholicism, and she was experiencing these sleep paralysis moments. And I was able to share with her, they only come out at night. And because of that, because of what you wrote, it prepared me to help somebody in my congregation. And they put that to use, and they've never had another episode since.
Woo. I said, that's really encouraging. Thank you for sharing that with me, Chris, because I always say, just like, that's great if you buy a book. And it's super cool if you lend it to a friend. One by one, people who are getting free, but please, like, get your pastor a copy of this, because every time someone comes to their pastor and the pastor's never heard of it, or the pastor is afraid of it, or the pastor just gaslights the person, they go to the world, they go to Babylon to figure it out, and they get in a worse heap of trouble. And so I just keep saying, like, please, like, get it in your church library, get the book in your church library, get it in your pastor's library, because there's a ripple effect from the people that are doing the counseling. And those are the people that really have to understand that this is a real thing. And they have to know how to biblically counsel people in the right direction.
Vic, we haven't plugged your book in a while. Tell people how to get the book.
Yeah, they only come out at night. Exposing the Dark Weapon of Sleep Paralysis, available on lamarzulli.net.
Yes.
The intrepid host.
The intrepid L.A. Marzulli.
And being a pastor / messianic rabbi, whatever you want to call me, just don't call me late for dinner. It's like, I love the weird stuff, but to be perfectly honest with you, I don't want to be knee deep in the weird stuff. But I think every pastor is going to have to be knee deep in the weird stuff, because it's like, this weird thing happened. Okay, I'm just going to send them Tom's way. Well,
that happens.
Yeah, and he's overwhelmed. he doesn't have time, or I'm going to send him to Vicki, or I'm going to send him here or send him there. And it's like pastors have to educate themselves on what's going on, because I'm finding out that I'm running into a lot of people who have experienced SRA. I've got a very dear friend of mine that is an MK Ultra survivor. And so all this weird stuff is coming to me, whether I like it or not. And I'm going to have to be prepared for it. And I'm trying to prepare my daughter, who's going through her master's program, to be a counselor. And I said, look, you're going to have to educate yourself. So I sent her to through the Black website and said, hey, check out these free classes, free resources to prepare you for when you run into this weird stuff.
Yeah. And well, hey, thank you for that plug, because throughtheblack.com, all of Russ's stuff is up there for free, all of our links, all that stuff. And I'm telling you, when I took the course Confronting the Powers, Chris, we knew about spiritual warfare in high school. But when I took that course, it was a game changer, because I understood the concept, but I learned strategy. I was like, oh, this is how you do this. Okay. We knew what it was, but we didn't have anybody really to teach us, like an expert to teach us what it was. So I cannot recommend that one enough, and the other ones as well.
Well, if we're completely honest, I think a lot of our zeal for spiritual warfare and our desire to learn about it was, because of George Ochoa and Jimmy Brown and Deliverance and that album, Weapons of Our Warfare. That was the soundtrack of our high school career.
Yeah. Well, and I was reading Frank Peretti, This Present Darkness.
Right. That came out then.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a game changer for me. So even though, it's a fictional book, but it's kind of illustrating, in a creative way, what happens when we pray.
And it's like the screw tape letters.
Yes.
And I don't want to plug this episode or whatever, but it's kind of a secular viewpoint on spiritual warfare. I don't know if you remember the spinoff show of The X-Files called Millennium with Lance Hendrickson.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, there's an episode called Somehow Satan Got Behind Me. And of course it's secular, so there's some pretty kind of cringy stuff. I wouldn't recommend that anybody just sit down and listen to it. You got to be really mature. But basically, everybody sees these old guys coming in and sitting down at a coffee shop eating donuts early in the morning. And everybody sees them as old men, but in reality, they're demons. And they're sitting around telling their stories, how they're luring people in and how they're deceiving people. And there's like 4 different storylines of people meeting their ill-fated doom because they let these demons influence their life. So it was kind of like a secular version of Screw Tape Letters. And I wish I could kind of sanitize it, and I would love to show it to everybody, because, it just kind of shows you the reality of what's behind the scenes there.
Right. No, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with that, but I would like to check it out. So I'll tell you this, we've talked about this show called Evil, and I can't necessarily recommend the show. The first season was pretty good, but then it got a little greasy after that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a show about a wannabe Catholic priest and agnostic, and then there's some other people in there. But it's all the stuff that we deal with and the stuff that we know about, but it's from this secular point of view, or this non-Christian point of view. And I'm like, wow, they got a lot of stuff right in this show. Anyway, watch, with caution if you watch that show. But my son was the one that told me about it, my oldest son. He's like, Dad, you got to see this show. And I was like, I don't really watch shows. And then one night he sat me down. We watched the first episode, and I was like, okay, let's watch the next one. And then we were like watching every one of them. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was like, you were right. This is a good show. So anyway, in that way, there's some stuff in there that may not be the greatest. But so, Chris, this was really cool. So another story about how you came across somebody that knew me was when you were listening to the Life podcast.
Yeah.
So this is kind of neat. And there's a podcast out there. Somebody that I know does this podcast. Actually, somebody that's directly related to my daughter does this podcast called The Life. and you were surprised. Do you want to tell the story from your point of view? Because here, somebody again, I know somebody that you're listening to, and we weren't expect. I didn't tell you to listen to that podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay. So Luca Baffy and his wife, they have the Life podcast, and they did the Way documentary, which I love to show to friends because it helps explain my journey and why I do what I do and why I believe what I believe. But Luke has all these different, messianic, Torah obedient Christian believers and their journey and their testimonies and 119 ministries and just all this other stuff and coming from different viewpoints, because on the one hand you have like a Torah obedient believer that's a survivalist, or then you have one that's a homesteader, or but I Luca Baffy, and I'm like, wait a second, isn't Tom's daughter married to an Abafi? And it's like, well, that's not a very common name, so I kind of wonder. So I kind of put two and two together and found out that, Luca Baffy, his older brother.
Yeah. My son-in-law.
Yeah.
His older brother. Yeah.
Right. And so that's who married your daughter, Evangeline. And come to find out her journey, that she too became a Torah obedient believer. And I'm like, this is just like totally blowing me away, man. And right. So, I kind of talked to him about it. I said, how does that work?
Yeah. No. Well, and you were excited. You're like, your daughter's related to Luca Baffy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, it's just Luke. Yeah. No, but this, I tell you what, I am so thankful for my daughter's new family. I call it my new family. I don't get to see him enough. And we always try to get together, but we just can never make it work because we're so far away. But we always have a blast, hanging out. And I tell you what, I am so thankful for that side of the family that I don't, get to hang out with or, know very well. But that was a cool story when you're, bringing it full circle.
Yeah.
You're in Canada. And again, it's just kind of neat when this stuff happens.
Kevin Bacon's got nothing on you, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's 7 degrees from Tom Dunn.
Yeah. 3 degrees from Tom Dunn.
That's funny. Yeah. Man, it's been a blast just kind of reminiscing and just thinking how God has rescued us and all the crazy things. Just, we could write a book about high school and the crazy things, that happened there. But it all comes down to Jesus Christ, okay? And preaching him, crucified, raised, from the dead, coming again. We believe it. He is the only way to salvation. So if you were just to kind of start to wrap this up, what message would you give to anybody out there? Like, just say, even by anybody that would be lost, what message, what would you say to them?
Wow. I mean, where do you start with that? I don't even really know what to say. Everybody's got their own personal journey. It's like everybody is a Bible in and of themselves. They may not read the Word of God itself, but they look at your life, and your life is a gospel tract. Your life is a gospel message. And so if I could say anything to the believers out there, it's great to memorize scripture. It's great to learn apologetics, but don't bank on those things. Use your own personal testimony, because they're going to want to know where you're coming from and where you got to where you are now. And for those that are lost out there, have an open mind. Like, if you say you're going to be dyed in the wool this, how did you get that way? How can you say that you're that way unless you look at the other side and thoroughly vet the other side of the coin? I mean, I had to do that in my own life. I mean, I was raised a Christian in a Christian home. I was saved at 6, rededicated my life at 13. But there come a point in time where I'm like, am I believing this because I was taught this? Or do I believe this because I really believe this? And there was a point in time I had to question every single thing I believed. So some things I still believe from the Free Will Baptist standpoint. Others I believe from a different standpoint. People look at me and they're like, wait, you're a Jew, but you believe in Jesus? Like what's the deal? And they're wanting me to explain. So I said, well, I guess you can call me a Messianic Baptist-costal. And they're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it, you know? And it's not like that I'm cherry picking. It's like, that's just what I see in the Word of God, right? You know, so for a non-believer, you know, keep your eyes open, because whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying, how's that working out for you? You know, it's like this never-ending goal of reaching of these empty promises that you can never grasp and take. I mean, that's New Age, that's any other religion in the bag, right? And the only thing that's going to satisfy is Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus Christ. It's the only answer. And that's where you're going to end. I think, was it Plank Guy that said you can run as hard and as fast as you want, but it won't make any difference in the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Chris, you said something very similar to what I was thinking, which is, let me know how that works out.
Yeah.
That's what I think, you know, when people are like, because I want to witness to people, and I just want to share, man, God has just been so good to me, man. And I have a peace. Where does that come from? We none of us should be having peace right now with what's going on in the world, but I have a peace. And, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Let me know how it works out for you. Okay. I'm going to serve God, and he's never let me down. He's never failed me. So I was thinking the exact same thing.
Okay. Go back to the 90s, Hot Metal Summer, right? One of those albums. Remember the interview with Larry Farkas? He said, well, yeah, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Everybody's preaching something.
What's your message?
What's your message? Because everybody's preaching something. Yeah. But is it okay if I kind of pick Vicki's brain a little bit?
No, yeah.
So, okay. I've heard you on so many different platforms and so many different podcasts, and I've heard you use the word Yeshua. And I have a really dear friend of mine that's like a sister to me. And, you know, she's like, well, where's she coming from? Or what does she believe? Or what's her story? I said, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. And so, you know, we're just kind of, I said, well, if I ever meet her, I'm going to find out. So, like, what is your story?
Well, so, I mean, I prayed to receive Jesus at 3 years old. I don't remember it. My mom just told me about it. So I was just always raised in a Christian home. And I think we were kind of always kind of in Baptist churches, though my mom was raised in an E-free church and my dad was raised in a covenant church. And so in Minnesota, we were usually in Baptist churches, but then around the 90s, a lot of the Baptist churches turned into non-denominational churches. So it was just classic evangelical. I went to Northwestern Bible College, which was a pretty conservative Bible college in Minnesota, in St. Paul. And so that was kind of where I was most of my life. And things kind of took a turn when my mom died in 2013. And I was living out in Philly. And I was in pretty rough shape when she passed away. And I was at, I would volunteer at this camp every year that is done by Johnny Erickson and friends. You know, Johnny Erickson taught it that. Yeah. And so it was like a respite camp. So you'd go for a week and you'd be assigned like a camper, like you'd be assigned like a child with some sort of a disability so that mom and dad could have a week of respite. So they would be off doing things and whatever. And so there was a guy there who was, I don't think he was a pastor, but I think he had some sort of like a ministry. And he was, I think of the Reformed persuasion. I think it was probably more of like a Calvinistic type of a circle that he was in. And they were there because they had a daughter with a disability. And so we just happened to providentially have a lunch together. And I sort of was pouring out my heart about this kind of like on the precipice of really a nervous breakdown with everything that was going on in my life. And so I was just kind of telling him everything in my life that had just been shattered and how I was afraid I was going to lose my mind. And so he explained that he had a ministry where a board stole the ministry from him. And so that was kind of his way of like empathizing with my grief and my loss. And I didn't have a notebook or a pen with me. And I hate it when people are telling me all this stuff and I can't write it down. And he was talking about lamentation. And he said, you know, like the Christian church has lost touch with true biblical prayer. It's not just whining and complaining and I want this and I need this and help me here. Like, and he explained the lamentation where, you know, David or Solomon or Jeremiah would lift their eyes to heaven, acknowledge who they were speaking to, and they would set the stage that God is to be glorified. Then they do all the complaining and the crying out and the help me and my enemies are after me and someone kicked my puppy and all that. And then you close the prayer out with, but you've been merciful before, you'll be merciful again. And so, but the way that he prefaced this entire little sermonette he gave me on lamentation was, he said, Vicki, the problem with the evangelical church in America is they've lost touch with their Hebrew heritage. Now, he didn't mean what you think he means. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Calvinist. He was not, he would roll over in it, he would be mortified if he knew that it was being interpreted in any other way. Well, when I get back to my room and I grab a notebook and a pen to write down all the stuff that he was telling me about Lamentations and everything, I couldn't remember one thing he said during the whole hour and a half, except the problem with the evangelical church in America is they've lost touch with their Hebraic heritage.
Wow.
So I wrote that down. And when I got home, I Googled it. And all of this Hebraic roots movement stuff started popping up, which shocked me because I'd never heard of it before. Mm-hmm. And I had kind of a similar experience as you, Chris, but it happened, the dots didn't connect in order. That was 2015. In 2011, I was doing genealogical work because my mom had always been curious about her mother's side of the family because there was rumors that there was maybe some relation to the Swedish royalty. Mm. And so I wanted to do this genealogy stuff for my mom before she passed away to maybe answer that question. And I couldn't find anything on her mother's side. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try on her father's side. And I did all this genealogical research, and I was living out in Philly. So I was really close to the National Archives. And so I went to DC and I did all this stuff and found out that through my maternal grandfather, we are directly related to through one of the sons of King David. It goes all the way back to the David family. And so at the time I just thought, oh, well, that's kind of cool. It really didn't even sink in. So then here I am in 2015 and all this Hebraic stuff is coming up. And then I remembered the whole Jewish lineage on my mom's side. And I'm not quite done my research now, but I'm pretty sure that, that's tribe of Judah. I'm pretty sure that through my dad's father, there's tribe of Benjamin. But I'm not quite through with the research there yet. So I don't really know what to call myself. I'm kind of like a Frankenstein because I'm very introverted and I don't like the big, huge groups where there's hundreds of people and there's a bunch of weirdos and there's a bunch of Kabbalah things coming in. And so I'm very leery of that stuff. I haven't had good experiences with that.
Ditto.
My dad and I, we have a small house church that we go to. And I guess we would all, we read the Torah portion, we eat biblically clean, we don't do the Christmas Easter, we celebrate the feast, but we don't do it with hundreds of people and all that stuff. I'm more of just kind of a small group kind of a person. I don't talk about it a lot, not because I'm ashamed of it, but it just, it doesn't come up a lot blatantly.
Well, my friend, she's like, I think she's Torah obedient. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. And so we're just trying to guess, but we kind of have an inkling that you had some kind of Hebraic messianic kind of influence. And so I was like, well, if I ever meet her, I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. I think what happened for me early on is really early on, before I even moved to the Ozarks, one of the first people I found online was Michael Lake. And I just love Michael and Mary Lou Lake. And they have a really balanced, sane way of preaching this kind of stuff. It's not the crazy stuff. And I don't know. I haven't sorted a lot of it out, Chris, because I don't kind of like what you were talking about earlier with Hudson Taylor. He didn't go and try to make the Chinese American or British, and I think God did in his sovereignty put me in the United States of America in the 21st century. I am an American. And so when I became a Christian, I didn't turn into a Greek because I had, I didn't start dressing in togas and speaking Greek and eating Greek food. I'm an American. And so I didn't conform to all of the cultural aspects of the New Testament. And so I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Well,
I'm still trying to navigate it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because the house church that my wife and I started, it's kind of the same kind of vibe and same kind of thing. Even though my wife and I are Jewish and we have a more Jewish expression, we don't expect our congregants to dress and act in the same way. So it's almost as if, if a Gentile keeps Torah, how would that look? It definitely wouldn't look Jewish. It would look more Gentile. And it reminds me of the story when I was in Nigeria ministering to the Igbo people who believe they are part of the lost tribe of Gad. And one of the cantors, he said, "Please teach me how to cant in Hebrew." And I said, "No." And he was hurt. And I said, "You know how to cant in Hebrew." He says, No, like you do it." I said, "You're Gad, you're not Judah."
Yeah.
I said, you cant the Hebrew in a very Hebraic, African way that's so beautiful, and I don't want to mess with that. And I said, "You're not called to be Ashkenazic or Sephardic or Jewish as Judah is. You're called to be Gad. I'm letting you be Gad."
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're doing with our congregation. But I'm sure you'll agree with me that, one thing that's a must is that you have to say, "Ya ha he ha ho mekaleka hi mekahini ho shua." That's the only way. Because if not, you're going to hell, right?
I know. Well, and my biggest problem, Chris, is I do tend to hyperanalyze and take things very slowly and sober-mindedly. And here's the deal. Because I haven't evaluated and I don't speak Hebrew and I'm not fluent in it, there are a bunch of things in the law that I don't know as a layperson or as a female or as a potential Gentile, even though I'm still trying to sort out the roots of my heritage. But there's things that kind of everybody's doing now. I'm blowing a shofar and I'm wearing tzitzits. And if you really look at the scriptures, like, I don't know that everyone in the world is supposed to own a shofar and be blowing it every 2 seconds. And that just seems disrespectful to me. Like, you're just carrying it around in your purse like a kazoo. Like, that just seems disrespectful to me. And was everyone allowed to do that at any time they wanted? Because I just want to know. And there's parts of the scripture that are confusing to me. Like with the tzitzits, the word, it can mean men or it can mean all the children. So everybody can wear these things, or only the men are supposed to. And until I know, I don't want to be one of these Eves like, well, did God really say that? I'm going to wear them. Like, and it's not out of a lack of desire. It's out of fear that if that's not what the Hebrew word means, because I'm not fluent in Hebrew, and this is something that men in leadership wore, and I'm running around out of my league. And so come on,
wait, hold on. Wait, Vicki, what are you saying? I mean, you should be able to do this because the Lord's called you to be a Deborah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, don't get me started. Nobody wants to start that chapter at verse 1 where it says everyone in Israel was doing whatever they wanted. They were completely out of covenant and doing whatever they wanted. They just want to start in the middle of the chapter where the woman had this leadership position, and you don't look at the fact that she had the leadership position because all of the men had gotten
it was a shame
emasculated.
All right.
Yeah.
I just think that's hilarious because every woman's a Deborah, right? Yeah.
I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Right. I'm a Dorcas.
Oh man.
Well, glad you guys are hitting it off.
Sorry to leave you out of the conversation, Tom. No, I just had to know, and I love your reverential, methodical research and respect for this. That you're not just jumping in on the bandwagon, but you're really trying to educate yourself and parse this out. And like the whole shofar thing just cracks me up because I call it shofar envy. Because, somebody, I've just got this little tiny shofar I'm totally pleased with. It's portable. I love it. But somebody's like, well, I've got a triple twist shofar.
I know. Sometimes I call it Toricon, like Comic-Con. It's all these people, they get together, they're wearing their costumes, and they've got their whole entire like Hebraic gift shop of stuff with them. And I just don't want to make it into a game or, hey, I'm bored and I need to jazz up my faith with some exciting new thing. And so I'm going to buy all these little souvenirs and I'm going to get I just don't want to make it into a role-playing game.
Right.
What do they call that? Role-playing, or there's another word for the people that do the
furry, Jewish furries.
Not what I was looking for, but anyway, yeah.
Not what I was looking
I'll
for.
remember it afterwards.
Cosplay.
Yeah, cosplay.
Yeah. I'm a furry for Jesus.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Oh man. Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for coming over tonight, hanging out, and so glad that you finally got to meet Vic and be on the show and tell the story. So much fun.
Yeah.
Folks, this is Through the Black. The roots of it is a thing called the violent peace, and that's how we got here. And I just want to thank you for just the support, the prayer. The show is only one part of the ministry. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that you guys don't see and we don't get to talk about a lot, just because it involves people's personal lives, and we can't share that all the time. But you guys mean the world to us, and when you share the show, it helps us get the word out about what we're doing, and it helps us grow the channel. And when you never know who's going to be blessed by what show. We have a very big archive at throughtheblack.com, and you can go on the resource page and you can here we go. We have a Rumble channel as well, and that's our backup channel. So don't forget to subscribe to that. Check that out. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for everything you guys do. We will be back. There's a lot of stuff going on the next couple weeks, but we will be back at some point. Hey, if you're listening to this right now, say a prayer for us. My friend Rob and I are going to be doing outreach tomorrow morning on the streets of Mansfield, and hopefully we'll be going live then. So guys, we will see you next time. God bless.